Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate and a very special episode celebrating the 38th anniversary of the Sinai Liberation Day on the backdrop of the Egyptian government fighting against the coronavirus pandemic and receiving the holy fasting month of Ramadan at the same time, as we did see President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in the past report stating that about 600 billion Egyptian pounds will be pumped as a matter of national security for Sinai, for the benefit of Sinai, and more inaugurations and more projects will be coming in the upcoming few months for the benefit of the Sinai Peninsula. And I'm honored to be having with me tonight on the Daily Debate Engineer H.Shamarka, the development expert. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Hi, thank you, Ahmed. Ramadan Kareem.
Happy Ramadan to you too, and of course greetings to you on the celebration of the Sinai Liberation Day, a very important day in the history of Egypt. How do you see it?
Well, it's very necessary at the current time. Sinai Peninsula has been the avid interest of a lot of the world countries. It's been the jewel, as Dr. Hassan mentioned. And it's great to have it connected with the Delta and have easy accessibility to it as an infrastructure. Plus, it will support the ongoing development of the Suez Canal projects from the economical zone and so on and so forth. Definitely important, definitely just a bullseye, very interesting achievement to happen at the current time with the backdrop of the coronavirus, very strategic. And we commend the President and the administration for doing such an exceptional job in a very short period of time with all these challenges, with the minimum amount of casualties.
Yes, on the other hand, President al-Sisi said during the inaugurations that the development of Sinai is the main challenge now. It is still a challenge. How do you see those statements, and what do you think will be happening in the upcoming 5 to 10 years in terms of developing Sinai?
Well, as President Fattah al-Sisi mentioned, there's a sequence to it. You have to start with the roads and the infrastructures and the bridges and the tunnels and so on. And now we are in the phase 2 of habilitation. We need people to start moving and start investing in Sinai. We need the young category of the population to start working in Sinai, to start having faith in that approach. We need to habilitate Sinai so that it won't be anymore a conflict zone, because until today it's still a conflict zone. That's why all these sort of developments and connections with all the rest of the country is happening. So it's not segregated anymore. We don't have Sinai separated from the rest of the country and you have to cross using a ferry or anything of that sort. You can just reach Sinai in 10 minutes. And now it's the second phase of habilitation. We need to have people there working, we need to have urban communities there, we need to have families and all that sort of things.
Yes, how do you see the idea of having different tunnels? We did have the Ahmed Hamdi tunnel in the past. Now we have the second tunnel named after Ahmed Hamdi. We do have different tunnels connecting the Delta with Sinai, coming from Ismailiyya and Shar'iyya as well, and different governorates of Egypt, the Delta connected to Sinai. How do you see the importance of this step, and to be connecting Sinai with the Delta in terms of 10 minutes just to be reaching from point A to point B? How important is that?
Crucial. It's very important in terms of logistics to have that sort of accessibility. And to, for once and for all, demolish the idea of illegal tunnels, of any sort of that things. You would have control on the logistics, on the customs that happens, and you'll have tolls for people using those tunnels and those bridges. You'll have quick accessibility from different governorates. This provides a platform of economy that can be provided to Sinai very quickly. So you have agriculture can be provided from one governorate, you have whatever the products, the crops that you want to bring to Sinai very quickly, you can have that right now. Or vice versa, anything coming from Sinai, logistically speaking, from the Suez Canal, which is the sequence, it's a main spine that you need to connect the Suez Canal and the logistics that's happening in the economical zone with the Delta and the rest of the country very quickly to reach until Saloum. and to reach until Sudan, so you need to reach the last point in the south and the last point in the west very quickly. So the tunnels and the roads provide crucial element in order for us logistically to be able to utilize the Sinai Peninsula as part of the whole country. It's not anymore Sinai, it's far away as an idea. It's just like going to Alexandria now.
Yes, how do you see the sum of money, £600 billion mentioned by the president, just to be developing Sinai as a matter of national security, not just about the investments, not just about the economy? How do you see the importance of this statement for the Egyptians when it comes to national security, and for the foreign investors when it comes to be hearing a big number or sums of money being pumped in Sinai?
Okay, so the first part, to the Egyptian community, hearing those sums, those are very lucrative investments that will return back to every person in the community by a benefit, one way or another. Whether it's in the deflation of the products, the logistics of going back and forth to Sinai. There's a lot of things that's going to happen in the market as a response to that. We're talking after the coronavirus crisis is over and the petroleum is not the same situation, and you have all these sorts of things, and economical zones started to operate as well, then you will start getting the benefit. Now, national security, I would ask everyone to go back to the history and look throughout the history. The Sinai Peninsula has not been actually habitated by the Egyptian population. It has been a place of conflict throughout the ages, and it has been a gateway of issues, a gateway of wars, gateway of things that we are trying to avoid. We don't need that right now. Now, going into looking in the future, look to what's going to happen after the coronavirus and how the world is now. The big players are fighting one another. Who's going to pay the check for what's happening? There might be a sequence of events that we go into a war somehow. We need to have Sinai connected to the rest of the country in a very strong way. So strategically speaking, and national security speaking, and economically speaking, it's a very important investment and very lucrative, and should have been prioritized from day one. So the first side of the second branch of the Suez Canal has been prioritized as the first national project to be done on the level of strategic projects.
Yes.
This is the second one in order to connect Sinai. The third one is the economical zone. Then you'll have 60, you're talking about 6% of the land, 60,000 kilometers of Egypt. Very important thing. It's been an avid interest for every colony that wanted to colonize it. Every strong country in the world wants a piece of Sinai. So it's definitely a good strategy. Now, for the investors, I would just tell them there's not going to be that much options. You will have to come work in Sinai. You will have, if you're working in logistics and marine and ports and stuff like that, you will need to have your ships passing through it. You will need to have your ships serviced. You will need to have the customs cut down, the tariffs cut down. You will want, for the best interest of your business, to work throughout the economic zone in the Suez Canal and in Sinai. Now, how we invest agriculture, whether we invest urban communities, what is the next step?
Yes.
This is depending on what the private sector is going to come in to support with. President Al-Sisi said a very important thing in the inauguration of the Mahsama and the Sahara desalination plants, which are 2 salinization plants that's going to work to provide 70,000 acres water, okay, from desalinized water. That's a great achievement that we're having right now in the lake, in the Timsah Lake. All right. Now, but he said a very important thing that we need to look at. We could not have waited. We could not have waited for the national security purposes, for all these purposes, for the private sector to have the appetite to come in and invest. That's why the military is doing what needs to be done right now, but then looking forward into it. It cannot be sustained like this, because at the end of the day, it's the taxpayers and all these sort of things. So you're doing the essentials now. But we are calling out for all the private sector. What else do you need? You have the roads, you have the tunnels, you have the logistics. After the coronavirus, the private sector will stand still, having no reason whatsoever not to invest very strongly to support the administration objectives.
Yes, you've mentioned the coronavirus in Egypt and the fight and the measures that are taken by the cabinet of Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli under the directives of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. What is the message, in your opinion, that is being sent out to the world, that we have development projects, inaugurations every week at the same time of fighting the coronavirus pandemic and welcoming the fasting holy month of Ramadan?
Or that we're very organized, that we cannot be labeled as the third world countries anymore, and that we're not what being represented in the movies, in the Hollywood movies. We are more stronger than that. We had very good precautionary measures. The last time I was in here with you as well, we were talking about the coronavirus and staying at home and the measures, and it was the third week. And I remember telling the audience that it's very important that the third week is critical. Our numbers are not staggering as it was expected. The measures have taken good place. Plus, you listen from first-hand patients that went through the public hospitals when they had coronavirus. I have personal people that I know that they go out and post things on social media and stuff, and say it's an exceptional job done by the Ministry of Health and the doctors that are working around the clock for that. So we commend them for that, and we praise them for that. They are the soldiers working day and night now to save the economy and to save everything happening in Egypt. The measures and the precautions, sending medical equipment to China and sending medical equipment to Italy and the US, lastly, is of course strategics and logistics and everything, but it shows that that the administration, under the directives of the cabinet and President Fattah al-Sisi, they worked on a very strict
There is a plan.
And the plan is being achieved no matter what the force majors happening are. A force major like coronavirus has halted and made everything stand still throughout the world.
Just in here.
But when you look at your economy, you see there is a benefit of not depending only on the private sector. You see, but now we cannot keep going on that pace. We got out of the speed bump. The president and the cabinet and the military have got us out of the speed bump. But in order to continue the road, we need the support of everyone just holding in their investments and their capitals. They need to start investing.
Yes, as we can see on the screen now, that Sinai is a story of development. But if we can look at the history of Egypt and the history of Sinai, to be praising the efforts of the armed forces and the security forces, as we did see on Saturday, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the First Lady Intisar al-Sisi saying or stating that the efforts of the armed forces and the police forces should be highlighted and should be praised on such a day. How do you see the efforts of the security forces and the armed forces throughout the history of Egypt, and more specifically during the fight to be liberating Sinai, and even nowadays against the fight of the coronavirus?
Exceptional. I think the political, let's say, parties that were actually criticizing what's happening and what the armed forces and the security forces are doing, they don't have grounds to stand on anymore. Any opposition which doesn't come on actual basis, they don't have any alibi. Because the armed forces and the security forces have proven that during crisis, which the country has been in a crisis for the past 8 years, by the way. We're talking about a crisis for 11 years that you stayed in, and then 30 years before it, you had all these sort of austerity measures that you needed to take in order to get out of the economical downfall that you have, and in all sectors. And now look today, you have in only 8 years, or less than 8 years, 6 years, the achievements being done first place by the military forces and the security forces. But we don't want to neglect or overlook the role done by the civil servants, starting from the cabinet, going down to the last nurse in the public sector, or the last driver in the public sector, who are doing exceptional job as well to support the military forces. And I would like to use this opportunity to just ask the media to start actually doing this sort of balance. There's a lot of work being done, especially in the medical sector right now, that need to be praised and condemned as well.
Yes, and we do have an initiative here through Nile TV International to be supporting and encouraging the Angels of Mercy and the White Army of Egypt through critical times, of course, in the world to be fighting the coronavirus pandemic. If we return to Sinai, and you've mentioned the private sector, how do you see the future when they see on television that there is development, that there is money to be spent in Sinai, 600 billion Egyptian pounds, that is a big sum of money to be pumped into Sinai. What do you think is the next step for the investors and even for the foreign investors to be thinking, I want to be coming to Egypt and I want to be targeting Sinai in terms of investments?
Well, there are different portfolios of investments that can be rolled out to the foreign investors and to the local investors. Usually the foreign investors they start operating once they start picking the momentum in any region when they see the local investors start actually to invest.
Yes.
So we need the local investment to provide us with this sort of PR to the foreign investor. We're looking into different portfolios of investments, whether it's ports, even services in the ports, in the economical zone. And we're looking into urban communities with facilitations, of course, from the country, from the administration and the authorities. You have the Sinai authority is going to provide facilitations to the first investors to come and pump money into and start building actual communities, because you need first to build, then they will come. So we need to build. The 600 billion were infrastructure. And looking in a lot of infrastructure, even in the future downfall of the water and all these sort of things. But now it's time for having strategic, whether it's what we call PPP, public-private partnership, between the authority and between public, between and private sector investors, that they come together and create establishments,
yes,
corporates that start actually having utilizing the capital in order to be working and then getting a return to the country and so on and so forth. Whether it's a user flocked, whether it's there's a lot of deals and a lot of portfolios, and we have exceptionally experienced people to do this sort of setup and to monitor it and control it very well. But we need them to sit on the table. We need them to start talking to the authority about investing those capitals, that whether they're using it outside, because there's no outside anymore. You will have to work here. But how do you do it? That's the question. Plus, with the petroleum surging down $20 a barrel, we're all anticipating what's going to happen in the second quarter, the third quarter actually. Because a lot of it will depend on it in terms of ships toll,
yes, and
payments for fees in order to pass, because it's not in our best interest. We need the petroleum to be the barrels. I mean, if you have a ship, you need it to fuel, not to take the longer distance around the continent instead of passing and paying your toll. So it's either you take your toll down, so that they would pass without gaining the profit,
yes,
or you would suffer losses. And this is another question that now we're suffering from in the Suez Canal. But there are other things. When a ship stops, it starts having services, it starts having maintenance. You have berthing, you have a lot of things that happen. And then you have logistics, you have new ports to bring in all the products.
That is the importance of the economic zone,
yes,
at the Suez Canal.
Yes, but then 60,000 acres, 60,000 kilometers, there are a lot of, you can have a small country. So we need to have urban developments. We need to have cities. That's what we need to start having now. Now it will take a momentum to be picked. It will take seeds to be set by this partnership in order to start getting Sinai habilitated. Once we start getting it habilitated, we don't have an issue. We don't have a conflict anymore. We have a part of the country. We cannot go into conflicts about terrorism and borders issues and all these sort of things, because you will have cities, you will have people living there.
Yeah, speaking of new cities, we did see the current administration under the tenure of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi building about 19 or 20 new cities all over Egypt. One of them is New Ismailiyah, New Mansoura, the new capital. How do you see the importance of technology to be having a more developed city being built inside Sinai, or how do you see the importance of technology when it comes to be building new cities and planning for the future ahead for Egypt in general and for Sinai in specific?
We were having a conversation with the administrative capital about this fact, about the smart cities.
Yes.
Now, if the smart cities were a preference before the corona, they are mandatory after the corona. Because nowadays you don't want to have crowds of people working on a manhole or a pipe which is not fixed, or a pole. So you need to have smart cities. The implementation of smart cities became very, very crucial now, after especially the corona, just realization of that, how people coming together can have a huge impact on the whole country and the whole world. So the Sinai can be an initiative, yes, to have a smart city, first of its kind, plus utilizing the logistics of the ports and the tunnels, along just a holistic, smart approach towards the future, that we don't need to have, whether it's we're talking about the infrastructure itself, or talking about the equipment being used for the logistics, transportation means, whatever it is. You can have a totally new look on a new city in Sinai that can provide a new benchmark for how the city is supposed to be built 2020 after the coronavirus, how we can do it.
Yes, and terrorism, how do you see the evolution of Egypt in terms of fighting terrorism under the tenure of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi? We did see big terrorist attacks before the tenure of President al-Sisi. How do you see the terms of peace, security and stability in Sinai first, and then for the rest of Egypt, as we did see and hear a number of attacks before President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi took office?
I think President Fattah al-Sisi have achieved a great deal of stability. There was a lot of resistance, and it's a common thing that we had in Egypt throughout the ages, whether it's internal terrorism or external terrorism. We've been the avid interest of a lot of countries around the world. We have a lot of resources, whether it's human resources or geographical location resources, whatever it is. But the President of Fattah al-Sisi and the cabinets and the military forces have done great deal of achievement when it comes to stability, and when it comes to utilizing the built environment, how you use development in terms of uniting the fabric of the society itself.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, we're all Egyptians, and we're not talking about foreign elements more than we want the local elements to be part of the fabric. We need to go back into this harmony and synergy between the members of the same community. I think the corona came to provide some sort of a wake-up call to everyone that it's not that there's other enemies, that we're not enemies, but we need to work together and to confront this ruthless enemy which we don't understand anything about. So stability, definitely we've done great work in terms of stabilizing Sinai Peninsula, the gateways to Sinai, Rafah and all these parts. Now with the tunnels, which are official tunnels, not non-official tunnels, you have less non-monitored accessibility. So even if there's any sort of attacks or any sort of conspiracies, it will be well noticed before it. Logistically speaking as well, you can urbanize Sinai very quickly, so there will not be any chances, because urban sprawls actually protect itself, so automatically, so you won't have any conflicts anymore. We need to start looking at the same concept in what's our borders with Libya and our border with Sudan as well. It's a very effective way of stabilizing the borders and stabilizing your accessibility with the other countries on the border and the surrounding region. But the great deal of it is doing specific things in terms of terrorism, like avenging the people that had died ruthlessly and very cowardly in some aspects. That gave us more spirit to the community. And we commend all the military personnel that's standing in the borders right now, protecting us to have this freedom that we can have it be on the TV and talking about them, you know. It's just a great deal of courage. It takes a great deal of courage. So when it comes to terrorism, I think it's an old chip. I think it's a burned card, not our interest anymore. Now our interest in the economy. What are we going to do in the economy? What's going to happen in the COVID-19?
We have a new level.
A new level of a challenge. That's now is not the. It's going to stay there. You're always going to have conflicts with terrorism internally and externally. But you have the measures and the protocols now to deal with it very fast. And you know what you're doing. It became a template. You can just repeat it. So, yeah.
And hopefully the level of development will be speeding up in the upcoming months. Engineer Ahmed H.Shamarka, the urban development expert, thank you very much for being with us tonight on the Daily Debate.
Thank you.
And this brings us to the end of the Daily Debate for tonight. Thank you for watching and goodbye.